Oh, okay. Let's do this. Jack the Ripper, Real Monsters Live. Gonna replay this. Okay. I'm kind of kind of weird right now, mentally. I just watched I watched screen grabs of the New Zealand massacre at the mosque. It's weird. Someone that what's I can't recall the guy's name. He actually did live stream it, and I could play the footage I grabbed, but it would be taken down. Uh, Horrific stuff. Anyway, so let me go ahead and play Real Monsters, and what I'm gonna do is watch the chat, answer any questions, and maybe offer some visual.
Yep, we are in.
We're live. Okay. Welcome to Deadman's Tome, Real Monsters. I am SK. We also have Wes.
Yeah, the volume is pretty loud.
Wes.
And Becky.
Hey.
And our special guest, Kelly Evans.
Hey, how's everyone? Hey, I'm special.
I know who Kelly is.
And we are here to talk about the most famous Jack, besides Jack Frost and
Jack Daniels.
and Jack Daniels and all the other Jacks.
All right.
Jack the Ripper.
Jack. Yay!
Arguably the granddaddy in the modern imagination of what a serial killer is to most
No
people.
doubt.
Yeah. So
Most
Kelly,
definitely.
Yes.
welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So RC in the chat. So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna listen to Jack the Ripper, the Real Monsters episode of Jack the Ripper. It's been played before. Also, one thing I became aware of just moments ago was the massacre over there in New Zealand, where what's the guy's name? Shit, let me pull up his name. I mean, I was just on that board, grabbing information. Oh man, fuck. What is the dude's name? What is it? Like Brandon something? Is it some Trenton? Was it? What was the asshole's name? This motherfuckers. Where are you? Oh, here we go. Yeah, Brenton Tarrant. A lovely individual. He should have ate a bullet. You know? He should have ate a bullet. Anyway, I'll go ahead and resume with Real Monsters.
Okay, well, I live in Canada. I used to live in Britain for about 20 years, so I got to go on the Jack the Ripper walks quite a lot because every time anybody came over to visit, they would like, oh, let's go on the Jack the Ripper walk. And eventually it's like, yeah, okay, let's go again. I kind of went through a massive Jack the Ripper phase when I was over there. And I actually worked down in the area where his bodies, like the women were found. So it was very cool. Yeah, so at lunchtime I used to go down and have my lunch in Mitre Square and all that kind of stuff. It was very cool.
Nice.
Awesome.
So
But
I'm
so like I said, I've moved back to Canada. I'm actually I retired early from working in finance, and I'm actually a full-time writer now.
Oh, sweet. And there we have on the screen a map from the Jack the Ripper's era, which was roughly 1888, 1889, when he committed at least a canonical
All right, I'm gonna put
five.
this for
right?
visual.
Yeah,
Kelly?
yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And I have to say, I'm kind of a firm believer in the canonical five because we can get into it. But anyway.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll pull up the
We
chat
have to
too so I
hear
can watch
more
it.
about that.
mean, I definitely am too. And it might be good to start with giving people an overview of what exactly Whitechapel was as a part of London back in that era. If I'm not mistaken, it was mostly known for the prostitutes who would frequent it, kind of a poorer area, and a den of vice, more or less.
It was the most rundown area of London at the time. In fact, there were a lot of advocates for let's clean up this area, and it wasn't only the prostitutes; it was also just the just poor people, just people that were living hand to mouth. They didn't have the concept.
It's always the poor
really
people, isn't it?
Landlords doing anything. So, there was one horrific picture that just has about 5 families crowded into one floor that's half missing. It's a second floor.
Man.
A lot of people came over a lot of Irish people came over after the potato famine, hoping to find work. London has always been this place where, it's kind of like New York. You can go and you can get your career established and you can find work there. So the place was flooded with people. The work wasn't there. Everybody that, couldn't find work ended up in the East End. The crime was rife. The drugs were rife. The prostitution was rife. Alcoholism. Everybody was drinking gin. It was cheap.
What kind of drugs they had back then?
You could get a room for sort of like, I think it was 4 pence a night. It was
very potent opium?
Even then, people couldn't afford it. It was just a mess.
Absolutely. Skid Row.
Absolutely.
Essentially, of London at the time. And
if I'm not mistaken, just the very beginnings of gas street lighting.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. So a lot of the streets around there, especially they kind of modernized it. Well, obviously they've modernized it, and the streets are more wide open, and obviously we've got modern lighting. But back then, there would have been coal fires. It would have been the gas lighting was minimal. There were lots of little windy passageways between houses and things, and houses were built on top of houses, and there were a lot of little passageways where you could get away with anything, obviously.
Yeah. Mr. Deadman was just asking in the chat there what kind of drugs were going around. This was definitely the era of the opium den.
Yeah,
in a lot of
exactly. Yeah,
areas.
You got it exactly. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't cheap by any means. It was still, but the poor, the upper echelons of the poor people could get their hands on it. Yeah,
it was
absolutely
well. Yeah. It was very much a socially accepted vice back then too. I mean, certainly more so than it had, getting into the heroin in, say, the 1970s.
Yeah, but at the same time, you got to remember that some of the, there was one of the victims, and I don't remember, I think it might have been Mary Nichols, the first of the canonical ones.
What am I doing?
Before she actually became was forced into prostitution, she actually had a job working for, as a lady's maid. And she writes home that these people are very religious, they don't drink, they don't swear, and she thinks she'll get along just fine with them. So there was a section of society that wasn't into all of that stuff. They were very temperate.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean to say that everybody was into it, but it was more accepted than it was.
Oh God, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it was like if you had a crap life, the only way to forget your crap life, the same as I guess a lot of things today, is you find some other way of dealing with it. And back then it was either alcohol or mostly alcohol. Yeah.
Smoking opium, drinking laudanum, which is a very potent tincture of opium and alcohol. Guys like, say, Samuel Taylor Coleridge back in the 1700s had an addiction to that.
Oh,
and so many others.
He comprised Kubla Khan while he was completely stoned.
He did, definitely.
But, not that you could tell.
That is a wonderful poem. I love that poem. It's got all kinds of weird, freakish shit in it. Come on.
Oh, me too. And the Jack the Ripper really started another trend for more modern day serial killers and going after the prostitutes and essentially victims that he knew really wouldn't be missed.
Well, it was interesting in a number of ways because it was also the first. It was the first, I guess, what we could say, social media organized, like social media run campaign of investigation, because it was the first time that this kind of thing had been widely reported in newspapers. So widely reported, in fact, that the American newspapers were picking it up.
Right.
And the newspapers were on top of it all the time. They were selling tons of papers. It was in their interest. But because the newspapers were so interested in it, more people were aware of what was going on that would have been. So it was like I like to call it like the first social media sort of organized. That put pressure on the police, obviously. That put pressure on everybody to find this person, do more investigation, which then led to better investigation techniques. And in fact, there's actually the first example
investigation
of
techniques,
psychological analysis that comes out of the Jack the Ripper cases.
So I want to ask about, the state of police, London police at that time, because if I'm remembering correctly, the idea of a city police force was pretty new.
It was new. The police force did exist, and they did have a branch in Whitechapel. And the police force was basically they were on foot constantly. And there were a number of police officers, and basically they would get a patch and they would just do the rounds, walk around on their patches. And some of the patches were so large and some of the policemen so few that you could do your entire patch in the course of about a half an hour. So if you wanted to kill someone, if you saw the policeman walk by on his way, get your job done. You knew he wouldn't be back for at least another half an hour. It was fairly easy. Now, having said that, once the murders started becoming more public, they piled policemen in. Like, they doubled them and tripled them.
Where all those policemen really?
Yeah, they actually called for policemen from other boroughs.
I mean, the policemen were sleeping around with the prostitutes.
All right. So let's start at the beginning. The first victim. What's the story there?
Okay, now that depends on who you think the first victim is. Now, we mentioned canonical 5.
I have no opinion.
Okay, I'm not sure how to... Okay, so a large number of, I guess you call them ripperologists.
Ripperologists?
And I don't call myself that. I just thought I'd throw that in there. God, I don't call myself that. A lot of them believe it's
a cottage industry.
It sounds like a cottage.
What is a ripperologist?
It's just weird. But anyway, the first of the canonical 5 is Mary Nichols, and she was married in August, late August. I think that's actually the end of August, 1888. So that's when people think it started. Now she's the one that's first because she's the first one that had the signs of the cut throat and the specific mutilation and the missing organs and the female bits cut out and that sort of thing. Now before that, there were 2 other women. There was one woman, I think her name is Emma something. Yeah, Emma Smith. She was earlier in the year. She got attacked by 3 men, like a gang. She survived her injuries, and she made it home and then died at home. So I don't think that's a ripper. It doesn't sound like it, does it? No.
And Martha Tabram.
Tabram's the next one. She's the next possible one. Now, she's in August as well, so that's kind of a key thing. She did have, I think she was strangled and did have some of the mutilation, but not the extent that, for example, Mary Nichols did. So there's debate about whether she was the first one or not. Maybe it was a tentative one. Maybe he was just starting out. So the injuries weren't as severe, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. So the end of the month, then we get Mary Nichols.
Ripperologist.
And she's sort of believed to be the first of the 5 that we were talking about, just due to the extent of her injuries, the missing bit of the womb, the way her throat was cut, like a right to left cut. I think she was strangled first, which is another common thing of his victims. So that's the one we think is the first one. The other 5, their names are Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. And they all have varying degrees of injuries. All of them were found outside in the early morning hours, except for the last one, Mary Kelly. She was a fortunate hooker. She had her own place, so she was able to take men to
Mary Kelly,
place.
fortunate hooker.
When they found her body in the room the next morning, it was the worst thing the police had ever seen. It was 10 times worse than any of his other victims. She was completely sliced open. Her ears were cut, her nose was cut, her lips were cut off, her breasts were cut off. One was placed by her feet, one was placed by her head.
Cut
her
off?
Intestines were completely unraveled from her body. Bits of her were missing. It was just horrific. You can actually go online and look at the pictures.
SK, I have a picture of that. It's the one that is sepia toned, and you can barely tell that it's a human. She's mutilated so bad.
I was just going to say, warn people if you're going to put pictures up, because I can't see what you're putting up.
We put all kinds of pictures.
Okay,
yeah,
so
the images, I don't think I can put on YouTube. I mean, I can, but
he had time.
I've seen too much today.
Got to Andy Chapman, and that was the key thing there, and privacy. But Kelly, with the strangulations that happened with the others, I'm wondering, do you think that he did that out of basically necessity to control them, because it was more or less out in the open when he killed, or do you think that he got his jollies off of that part psychologically?
I don't know. I have a completely different theory that I've been sort of researching, and I haven't actually seen any evidence to the contrary. Now, when you're looking at Ripper research, there are over 100 potential people that this could be. So it's one of those situations where, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious, but you can pull out one verse of the Bible and make it mean anything without taking into context the greater situation. So there are hundreds, like literally hundreds of people. There was so much going on at the time. I have another, you could pretty much make any theory fit any of the candidates, depending on what there is, So I've got another theory that I've been investigating.
All right,
do you mind if I try it out here? This is the first time I've discussed it.
Yeah, okay, absolutely.
So what if the killings were politically motivated?
Oh, politically motivated.
So, for example, none of the women that were killed showed any signs of defensive wounds, any signs of a struggle. So it was obviously they were either looking for the hookup, or it was someone they were comfortable with, like maybe a policeman.
Could be a cop.
The prostitutes were very familiar with the policeman. They were on first name terms. And the other interesting thing that I've got a whole bunch of other facts, but another interesting thing is that when the killing stopped in I think it was November 1888, there was a changeover of the police commissioner to a new person. Also at the time, there was a giant map done that showed different degradations of poverty within the entire East End. And there were a lot of advocate groups trying to get people to pay attention to this area. Now, if you're a clever property developer, or whatever it was called at the time, and you collect up a few of these properties because they're really cheap because of, the level of degradation in the area, you're going to make a fortune over the next couple of years when they pass all these work acts and children acts and things like that. So just a thought. What if you deliberately want to draw? What if you deliberately did it to draw attention to how bad the area was, so that the property values went down?
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, see, that makes a lot of sense. There's also isn't there also a theory that Jack wasn't a Jack at all, but a woman?
Yeah, Jill the Ripper. I've heard that one. I've heard it discounted just because of the amount of strength that would have taken to strangle some of these women.
What do you think about that?
It could have been a large woman, maybe?
A large woman.
Maybe.
Funny you should mention that. I just saw a news article about a woman in Idaho who
body positive woman
break up a dog fight involving her own dog, and found out it was a mountain lion fighting with her dog, and she separated them and held them apart, and then yelled to her husband to go get his gun.
Oh my God, there's a lot of Bruce Banner stuff going on there. Jesus, gamma rays or what?
So, to say that, a woman may not have the strength to do what she did, some of them do.
Well, it also depends on the situation. You've heard that, like I just made the Bruce Banner joke about the whole women lifting cars off their babies when there's a danger. Right. This is someone deliberately targeting prostitutes. And from a psychological point of view, and I know we're injecting 21st century stuff back onto the period, but people that kill prostitutes are generally men.
Right.
It doesn't follow a pattern. Now, that's not to say it might not be, but there's not a lot of evidence given just the eyewitness accounts and things like that. So I don't know. It might be. I mean, like I don't
see it being a woman either.
No, I mean, you can twist the facts to fit any of these theories. Like I said, I can twist a bunch of facts to fit my theory that it was politically motivated. Everybody just assumes that it was a serial killer. You can twist the facts to fit any of the butcher,
the town butcher?
But There are a few that I kind of like.
All right, so let's get into who are some of the, I don't know, the top suspects.
Can I get this fish?
And some of these people are, pretty highly placed, as I understand it.
Oh God, yeah. Let's see. There was the Queen's nephew was accused at one point. I think it was I think the Queen's nephew, it was Victoria's nephew. I think he was accused because he was trying to cover up a pregnancy of his mistress. So I don't quite understand how killing a bunch of women and pretty much gutting them.
That seems like a pretty weak link.
There was also the conspiracy theory that it had something to do with the Masons, and that all goes back to that stupid. One of the bodies, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, was found with
Isn't that just like a beer drinking
graffiti
club now?
on the wall. It's something along the lines of
with the word Jews misspelled with a U.
Mm-hmm, the Jews are the people who are responsible for something, But a lot of people think now that was there before. It wasn't. It has nothing to do with the murder, so it really doesn't have anything to do with Freemasons and all that kind of stuff. By the way, if you read John Moore's From Hell, it's all about the whole. It involves kind of the Freemason line along with the guy trying to hide his pregnant girlfriend's baby or whatever. It's a good read, but completely bollocks.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure. I am a Freemason. I actually did a college thesis on the Masons and the Bavarian Illuminati, but
awesome.
It's basically discounting it and how the Illuminati were stamped out. But the Masons were very ubiquitous in that era, in Britain especially.
I know it just doesn't stack. It doesn't stack up.
No, not at all. Yeah. Not at all.
But the whole secret message was more than likely
the Freemasons probably
aren't
what they used to be.
But because it would have, because there was this sort of like dead body tourism thing going on, like people were going to the places where the bodies were found, they washed it off the wall just to make sure it didn't incite any violence.
Well, and my theory with that is it's more than likely that whoever wrote it was semi-literate and misspelled. If you look at the simplest explanation.
Well, that's
something like that.
No one took a picture of it, as far as I know, and the reports have it spelled a couple of different ways, so it's kind of hard to know who to trust.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But
let me see, who else do we have?
One of the latest conspiracies that I had heard about this, the History Channel actually did a show on it being linked to H.H. Holmes, which is just absurd to me. And if you look at it, H.H. Holmes was the Chicago serial killer.
Read about him. He's interesting.
There's a book called The Devil in the White City. And what Holmes did was he built what is called a murder castle for the World's Fair.
Murder castle.
In 1903.
Oh,
and
wait a minute.
Yes, it was essentially a hotel that had various ways of disposing of bodies and killing people within it.
This is the guy that American Horror Story was based on, the hotel version.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Right. Okay, context, got it.
But the thing with that is Holmes was very organized. He was very systematic in how he, killed people for, as I said, their money in that hotel.
But what's the connection? Was he in London?
There's no real proof of that as far as I could see. But it's also a big leap because, people I think tend to impute a lot of intelligence on Jack the Ripper when he really was more, as far as I could see, mixed. Not organized and not disorganized.
Well, he had a lot more opportunities geographically than we realize today, because when you go to the area, like Mitre Square, for example, is a beautiful place. It's all lit up and it's beautiful. And there's an open park area that they've torn down a few buildings. But at the time, it was completely enclosed, and there was like one lamp on one corner. So the other three corners were completely encased and no lights. So it would have been, I don't know, I hate to say it, but a lot easier than these days.
It would probably be a lot easy.
But either way, with something
very easy
like
to get away with murder back then.
With anything that's attributed to Jack the Ripper with a great degree or with a decent degree of accuracy, considering what we know, it's going to be way different than what we know Holmes did with the murder castle. Is my point.
It doesn't sound like his MO at all.
No, not at all.
He sounds very. I'm sorry, I don't mean to love a serial killer, but I love the idea of the murder hotel.
Mm-hmm.
The murder
hotel
sounds
pretty
pretty metal.
The woods up in Chicago is where it was.
So, were there any? I saw one show, and I'm coming at this from, all of my information that I have about the Ripper comes from movies.
Yeah.
And
there are a lot of them.
And there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And TV series and stuff like that. Wasn't there some physicians that were suspected as well?
I was just going to say, there's another. You were just talking about like a U.S. connection. There was another guy called Francis Tumblety. And I love his last name, Tumblety. He sounds like a fictional character from Dickens or something.
Tumblety.
He does.
He actually was one of the main suspects at the time, because he visited Europe several times. He traveled all over, like Scotland and England, Germany, and everything. And he was very much a self-promoter. He was a physician, very much a self-promoter. He always bragged about knowing all these famous people like Dickens and things like that. But I think they arrested him on an unrelated charge of gross indecency. And then I think when they went to his his house, they found jars of like organs, which led them to suspect that he might have been the Ripper. At the time that it was being investigated, he then left. I don't know how he managed it, but he managed to flee to New York and set himself up there. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. He might have just been a weird person. I don't know whether the organs in the jars was ever actually proven, because again, they didn't take pictures. It was just written down. An eyewitness sort of thing said it. But he was kind of discounted because his age and appearance didn't match some of the descriptions that were given at the time. Like a tall gentleman, a young gentleman, someone looking vaguely European with a peak hat. Somebody said a top hat at one point, but so he kind of was discounted as well.
Now, who was it? It's another interesting question there. Is it more likely that the Ripper was a doctor, or maybe something like a butcher or a furrier?
I thought he was going to be a butcher. I thought he would be a butcher.
That's the big argument, is that no one really knows that. That's the other thing is that the surgeon that they called in, they called in a number of surgeons depending, for each of the murders. So it wasn't always the same person that came in and took a look at the body. And it's kind of split. Half the surgeons said, yes, this person who did this has some sort of surgical skill. The other half said, no, he's a hack. So the side that everybody leans to is, the doctors... The doctors that say they were a surgeon, that's more exciting. But the doctors, half the doctors said he wasn't. But no one is interested in that side because that's not exciting.
Maybe it depended on how good the doctors who did the examination were.
Well, yeah, it depends on a lot of things. And if you
how
go
good
back,
the doctors are.
You're a skilled surgeon, you look at something and go, oh, that's awful. But if you're not a very good surgeon, you look, oh, yeah, that could be.
That could be. I wish I could do that, yeah. Well, if you go back to my little, I'm going to call it my stupid little theory. I don't know if you know Monty Python, but there's a A&M, and never mind. This is my theory. This is mine.
Monty Python's good source.
If it was
the dinosaur theory.
Yes, dinosaurs. Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave Anne Elk alone. If it were someone they knew, say a policeman that was doing this stuff on behalf of some political figure or someone else, who's to say they didn't have a father or cousin that was a butcher? You pick things up.
Interesting.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You visit your father's shop. You grow up with your father a butcher. You're going to pick up butchery skills. You decide instead to go into policeman instead of the butchery. Then you've got some skills. You can do a good roast on a Sunday afternoon, or
a good roast
body.
Yeah.
The other there's another suspect that was a butcher. He was known as Leather Apron. He's another one of the big suspects.
Leather Apron.
And he was discounted as well. I think he had an alibi for most, if not all, of the murders. There's one I've come across recently.
But I swear there was a butcher that had a route that matched up.
His name is Charles Lechmere. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
He was like a delivery boy for a local like a butchery outlet. So they carved up all the animals and all this stuff, and they delivered it all over the East End. And he was that. So he would go into work at about 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. But his route to work coincided with at least 5 of the bodies. His timing coincides, like the way he described his walk to work when he was questioned by the police. There's missing time. He was found over top of one of the bodies. He lied to the police about his name and his address, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of suspicion about this guy.
Yeah.
The only thing I have
looking at the map, that's quite a route to take.
The ones, okay. So if you're looking at the map and you see Whitechapel Road, the murders above Whitechapel Road, so north of Whitechapel, are all his way to work, because he lived kind of sorry, I'm very bad with directions. He lived to the east and sort of traveled more west, so he traveled through all of those murders. And his mother and sister lived south of Whitechapel, and he would have had to have gone past the other 2 murders down there to get to his mother's house.
So, probably him.
I don't know. The only thing
he has the route.
Is why
he was around the bodies.
Because if there's a picture of him in his 80s. He lived a full life. He had like tons of kids. He was quite prosperous apparently. But why would someone do that? Why would they stop? There's got to be a reason for it.
Right.
People that do that amount of damage. Yeah, people that do that amount of damage just do not stop cold turkey.
Maybe.
And I mean, there's no other evidence that this guy did any other killings. So I don't know.
Right, there's no similar killings elsewhere in the country or.
No.
I mean, Dexter stopped.
Have you heard?
Did Dexter stop?
Have you heard the theory that it was all?
Dexter became a lumberjack.
A rug puller.
I don't. A what?
What?
A rug puller.
Say that again.
Like a joke?
That it was all a hoax.
So all the photographs.
There was a drunk journalist named Thomas Bullings who had been accused of forging the 3 letters sent to the London newspapers and police.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I believe those were forged.
Yeah. We do have those in the slideshow as well, the Dear Boss letter and the From Hell letter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
For people who are watching that.
The picture that's up there now, this is not a hoax. These women were, these women are carved up seriously.
Yeah, man. The graphic images.
I mean, if you look at Andy Chapman, it looks like a wild animal got to her, a pack of wolves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's that bad.
But what? Okay, so a question. Just taking that a step further, what would be the purpose of the hoax? To do what? Like my theory is to draw attention to the plight of people in East End and have someone pick up some cheap property. But what would be the purpose?
Well, that's what they said was that it was noted about the violence against prostitutes at the time. It was very common.
Maybe like a double jump.
Okay. So same sort of idea, draw attention
draw attention to the thing. But it also said that it was to help boost Thomas Bulling's career.
Oh,
also,
wow.
Okay. That it made him.
Oh, so it was like a Jesse Smollett thing?
Famous for
it looked like this actually happened.
Well, he did sell
and whatever.
He sold an awful lot of newspapers. The day after that letter came out and he published it, he sold like 3 times as many newspapers as he normally did that day.
I don't think this is a Jesse Smollett thing.
So, I mean, there's that. I don't know that I necessarily buy into that at all, but I know that, part of it stands to make sense, that he probably did the letters.
It's interesting. I'm not sure about it. Like I kind of, it ties in with my thing about look at the mess we've got in the East End of our city sort of thing. But yeah, for one man to arrange all of that, he would have had to have had a lot of money and a lot of resources beforehand.
Oh, I don't know that I would say that if he was involved in it, I would say that it went a lot further than just one person.
Well, see, now we get back to now if we get back to the really Yeah, if we get back to that, then we could have, having a newspaper reporter in your pocket would be great if you were a politician wanting to, and if the best way to engage people is to say, look what I'm doing to these horrible people, these poor people in the East End.
I'm cleaning it up. Take advantage of the situation.
Well, it all fits into the same sort of theory, really.
Reporting on a story that's real popular.
But the pictures are they're so horrific to be fake. I don't know. You'd have to have a really, really good.
Yeah, I don't know that
person
I would. I don't know that I would say that they were fake, but if that story, is true and that our theory holds up, then I wonder if, it wasn't that okay. The police let's make it a little more horrific than it was.
There are police reports and coroner's reports and shit like that.
Yeah, well, you pay people enough. And
this Jack the Ripper's as fake as Sandy Hook.
More.
That's a rabbit hole that makes no sense, Becky. I'm sorry, but you have nowadays people saying Sandy Hook was fake. There's always been these kinds of conspiracy theories, and
Victorian fake news.
Yeah, exactly.
Victorian fake news.
I just came up with a theory. I think it was Oscar Wilde.
Oh, look at that chick.
Why not?
I'm a Wilde fan. Go on.
I have nothing to back it up. It's just a name that popped in my head.
I have nothing to back up my theory.
Didn't we just decide that you were Ted Bundy?
SK could be Ted Bundy.
Jack the Ripper too.
Yes, I'm exactly that.
He's reincarnated.
Oh, wait, did you guys ever watch the old Star Trek? Do you remember the one where Jack the Ripper was like a time-traveling demon and he showed up on the Enterprise?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, this is Jack the Ripper discussion. Your theory.
Yeah. I have nothing. I was just making it up.
Oh, damn.
I do find it interesting with those theories. The other ones that connected to America about a possible serial killer that rode the rails that may have been the Ripper. That he came over here and...
Oh, I was going to say there weren't that many rails in East End London at the time, but...
Oh, no. I'm talking about rode the rails in America.
I get it, yeah, sorry.
But... and that ties into another crime that we should talk about on this show sometime.
Oscar
and that's
Wilde?
The Villisca Axe murders.
Interesting.
That's one that is kind of my wheelhouse and that I've studied it rather extensively.
I don't think I
possible roving serial killer for that one too.
I think everybody should have everybody should have a favorite serial killer. And since I'm a historian, a medievalist, this is the closest I can get to the medieval period. So Jack's mine.
Yeah.
Well, and Villisca was 1912, so really.
That's pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, when was Lizzie Borden? I know she didn't. I know she didn't do it, but when was she?
Oh, I'm gonna have to look that up, man.
Caught
me off guard.
I thought it was the 20s, wasn't it?
I don't know.
I thought it was earlier than that.
I thought it was
1892.
Okay,
yeah,
I thought it was
1892.
What? That bone actually stopped the other bone. Huh. There's physics in this game.
Do you really think she didn't do that? I had always been of the impression that she might have killed her father at least because he was a rapist.
No, I don't. I
molested her.
If you look at the evidence, they didn't find the axe. They didn't find any blood. There was a guy that was arrested that had killed someone down the road in the same neighborhood that had killed someone. It was just no. I don't think she did it. I think she probably wanted to, but I don't think she actually did it.
Yeah. There's definitely a difference there between opportunity and drive to do it.
And there was another instance of the press really just picking it up and demonizing her. But they went through all of the evidence at the trial. She was never convicted. She was let go. But because of the press, her reputation was ruined. And she ended up living with her sister for a while and then just dying an old forgotten woman. It's kind of a sad story.
Not forgotten. We still have the nursery rhyme.
Yeah. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 bucks. When she saw what she had done, gave her mother 41. But apparently there's a second verse. I should look that up, which I didn't realize there was a second verse.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
I didn't either.
Lizzie Borden song. Okay.
Lizzie Borden biopic. Lizzie in the works.
There's a TV show about her right now, isn't there? Or a movie.
Lizzie Borden biopic. Lizzie, starring Chloe Savigny, I can never say your name right, and Kristen Stewart.
I think that's the one. Yeah, I think you see it on Netflix.
Lord. Does Kristen Stewart play a dead person? Because she'd be really good at that.
It's a good show.
She'd be really good at playing a cadaver, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Beyond that, yeah, not so much.
Man. You know, that reminds me of, I think, the funniest quip about an actor I've ever seen was when a critic said of, what's his name, George Raft, that he's as wooden as a cigar store Indian back in the 1940s.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I am wrong. There isn't a second verse. I was getting it mixed up with Ring a Ring a Rosies. There's a second verse to it. Well. So anyway, never mind.
Yeah, all about the Black Plague. There you go.
It's not though, but that's for a different time.
Oh, Kristen Stewart is Bridget Sullivan in that movie. Savigny is Lizzie Borden. She was the girl in Twilight.
No, who's Bridget Sullivan?
Oh.
I am not familiar with the Lizzie Borden people. I know Lizzie Borden and her sister and her parents, and pretty much that's it.
I'm going to have to look that up. The site I'm on does not tell me.
So there would be a date. So imagine there's a place where all the serial killers go. Would you so hook up Lizzie Borden and Jack the Ripper?
Oh, a place where they all go?
If she actually really did it. Well, I'm not making any assumptions.
Like a serial killer, dating service?
I don't know if you watched The Good Place, but they've gone to the bad place.
Sullivan was her Irish maid.
Oh, okay.
Kristen Bell.
Mm-hmm.
I love The Good Place.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I've noticed about English society, and I don't mean upper crust society, but I mean just the way that they conduct themselves, and I noticed this in a lot. I watch a fair number of British shows, and
yes, and TV is so accurate.
Yeah, obviously.
Portrays real life so real. Sorry, go on.
But there is an attitude, and we have it too.
That's serial killer convention.
And that is that, you know,
they already have that. It's got Killer Con.
Certain people could not be suspected of crime because of their position and or education. That it was just literally unthinkable.
Their social pedigree.
Bastard sort.
It's the same as the States. When you get to the upper echelons of society and you get, I'm sorry, but little white boys doing horrible things and, you know, we don't want to ruin his career type thing. It's because he comes from that sort of background and he's going to that sort of school. And yeah, it absolutely exists in London as well. It's the old boys network from what their private schools. They call them public schools. So it's still just a big public school boy network. It's less so now, but it still exists. Yeah, I encountered it when I was working in banking.
And how much, you know, that could have come into play with the Ripper, right? That maybe they just absolutely refused to look at some people.
Oh, absolutely. That's why there was all kinds of, like, the suspicion about Queen Victoria's nephew and, you know, this sort of thing. It was like, are you seriously suggesting that royalty is involved in this? Are you kidding me? So that was a big sort of no-no at the time.
Royalty it's only now we're able
to talk about it. It's like they're royalty. They wouldn't dare do something like that. Yeah, well.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Royalty doesn't kill people. They kill
Speaking of evil butcher.
Of people, but not individuals.
Not directly. Mm-hmm. No, you don't get your hands dirty. Come on.
Right. You just
people do that.
Yeah.
It is pretty much, at least years ago, not necessarily so much, that all the people that went to these, like I said, these public schools, what are private schools, you know, like Eton, and then they would go on and go to Oxford and Cambridge and things like that. They do all keep in touch. They do form a network. They do become some of the top people in the country. They run the biggest industries and they're heads of all the banks and stuff. So yeah, it is there.
I'd argue it's a human foible. Very
much.
Well,
I think it is too. And I think it's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this show.
Look at that.
And one of my motivations
Still can't reach that.
was to try and dispel this mythology that we have, and I think it's a very human thing, that we can spot these evildoers, these really, the serial killers, that we would be able to somehow to tell if we were in their presence.
Absolutely. We've been driving that point home.
I don't know.
I need to bring it over here.
You can't.
You can't. No, you can't. It's funny you should mention that. Actually, I was watching Leah Remini at the moment is doing a show about Scientology, and she's trying to get them to go after their taxes and etc.
Fantastic programming.
There was one on yesterday. They had a police officer on who said we need to start training people how to identify people in cults. Like, we need to start training police officers to see the signs of someone who is in a cult, who may be in distress, that sort of thing. And I remember sitting there thinking, that is just, I guess, if you're on the receiving end, there must be more obvious signs. But if you're on the giving end, it's hard. There are creepy people out there who just walk among us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All the time. Creepy people all the time.
And if this guy dressed like everybody else and spoke like everybody else and didn't make himself stand out, and you got to remember the prostitutes themselves. I don't mean to say that they asked for it, but their job was to take someone into a corner and, service them.
Well,
so
they weren't asking for it, but it's a very risky, occupation.
Still
they were ideal victims because of that.
Yeah, it was the nature of the business. Only the last of his victims had her own room. The rest of them just had to drag some guy out into a corner. So I'm right. I'm not saying they're asking for it, but they certainly
they made it easy. They made it very easy
helping
for
the situation with the way that they're actually living their lives.
Right. So it's the practical end of their occupation.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying that it's like, because of the way that they have to do their business and because of the people walking around and everybody, I think it would be difficult to spot someone like that.
In SK, what if Jack was the Dennis Rader of his day? We did our show on BTK, and the guy turned out to be the president of his church, active in his community.
Well, how did he do it? That's what people do. They hide their, especially, I don't know. There's certain impulses that I guess certain people have, and you just cannot reveal them. And you can't reveal them in the 20th century, and you couldn't reveal them in the 19th or the 18th century. So they've always remained hidden. The need to do them increases the less you actually indulge in them. Eventually you indulge in them. But if you remain completely normal, your everyday life, you maintain your job, you maintain your family, you say you've got a hobby, you disappear for an hour every night, no one's going to know. They made an entire TV show out of it. Criminal Minds.
Right.
And look at Bundy, he was glad handing at political rallies. He worked at He worked on a commission about sexual violence against women. He worked on a suicide hotline.
Yep.
And Rule literally sat next to him on the suicide hotline, and she had no idea.
Right.
Unless you're a really, really good profiler and you get to spend time with the person face to face, talking to them, and you maybe have a little bit of a baseline, they're just undetectable.
Yeah.
Until they make a mistake, and that's another issue.
Now, if I were to take a guess, and this is just personally what I think, I would say that the Ripper likely was not the Dennis Rader of his day, if you look at just the pure savagery of what he did, but that's just my opinion with something like that.
Just based on reading psychological reports and stuff like that, and if we assume that he is a psychopathic serial killer of some sort, he doesn't like women, so he may be gay, he may have had an overbearing mother, he goes after prostitutes, could be gay. So he may have an issue with, obviously has an issue with them, so he has an issue with women because of the way he dissects the bodies, he removes the female organs. You can put together a profile just based on the coroner's reports.
Right. And a guy like BTK had tremendous control. And I don't see that level of control with what we know about the Ripper.
Well, it could also be the neighborhood he chose, whether he chose the neighborhood because he's familiar with it or because there are all these little tunnels. And seriously, if you go over there at any point, you can still walk around little streets that seem like they're little medieval streets with very poor lighting even these days. So he might have chosen the area because he knew he wasn't going to get caught. But on the other hand, there was a police presence, so he did have a limited amount of time to do what he was doing.
Right.
So I don't know, like how do you catch? Well, obviously they didn't catch a guy like that, did they?
Mm-hmm.
No.
What was the overall time frame for all of the killings, start to finish?
1888 to 1889.
Yeah, if you stick with the canonical 5, they started in the beginning of August and they only went to November, the end of November in 1888. You can tack on a few more if you don't believe in that 5, so you can trace it back to April of 1888 and then forward to February or March 1889, I think. I don't remember the month, but yeah, definitely into the next year.
So
you can write it on their backs.
Between like 15 to 24 months, something roughly speaking.
Yep. But if you believe the original 5, then it was only August, September, October. It was only over a 4-month period, and then they stopped. Yeah.
4 months.
Mm-hmm.
That is
five women.
That is so bizarre.
But also remember, 2 women were found in one night because they think he was interrupted with the first one, and then the second woman was found later. So average that in.
Yep.
No, but still, to start and finish within a 4-month time frame is really odd.
Well, that's why people think that something might have happened in November. If he was a psychopathic killer, like we know he is, he wouldn't have stopped unless he either died, was sent to a psychiatric hospital, moved to America,
imprisoned.
Went to prison. Yeah, something stopped
for an unrelated crime. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or did.
Yeah. Yep.
Or transported, maybe. Were there anything like that in Australia?
Whoa.
I know that there were some similar killings in New York.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Not long after that.
I don't remember hearing anything in Australia. That's the Tumblety thing. That's why they think he was a suspect because of the New York killings. But I don't remember anything.
And that's where some people also tie those into what I said about a killer riding the rails throughout the country. Yeah.
Right. Got it. Okay. But no, I don't remember reading anything about like Europe or actually, there might have been something in Europe, but it was a tenuous connection.
A whip sword.
I certainly don't remember Australia, no.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say it didn't happen. I just no one's picked up on it, or I haven't seen it in any research or any of the books I've read.
I think the more famous Aussie serial killers are more modern, if I'm not mistaken.
It sounds
the ones that killed in the outback. Yeah. I can't remember the names off the top of my head.
I'm trying to think of it, yeah.
Which says a lot for the level of criminals that they took the trouble to transport to Australia, that they weren't these awful people like they were made out to be. Otherwise, they would have had a hell of a lot more crime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know I don't know that the whole time period very well. Like I said, I'm a medievalist, so ask me about the 1300s and I'm good. But when they were transporting them, did the death penalty exist? Like, would they have put someone to death who had murdered someone, and that's why the level of
they
criminals that went over weren't
right. They didn't bother with that. They just hung them.
Okay, so it would have been mostly petty thieves and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, who gets shipped over to Australia?
Thinking about that medievalist idea, SK. And Kelly too, if you'd want to come back. I don't know how much you know about Gilles de Rais. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Are you talking about the Templar?
Yeah, I was just thinking about him as one of history's possibly first serial murders.
Oh, that's interesting, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting in that time frame. If you really wanted to be a killer, you just signed up for the army.
Yeah, seriously.
Mm-hmm. He's supposedly killed a bunch of children, if you believe the narrative about him. I think some of that was extracted under torture.
But remember back then that the torture methods were horrendous, and you would have said anything to get it to stop. And also remember that people back then had a much stronger faith, like a hugely stronger faith. It's like
Mhm.
when you trip over something, you know you're going to fall down. You just know it's going to happen. These people, if they did something wrong, they knew they were going to go to hell. It was just,
Mhm.
you know. So the morals were slightly different as well than more modern serial killers. So take
Gonna
that
go
into
to
consideration.
hell.
Oh, absolutely. And he was a contemporary of Joan of Arc, SK.
Yeah,
he fought with her at the
Oh.
Siege of Orleans. So,
Interesting.
yep.
Yeah, you know, it has occurred to me, you know, why does it seem like a more modern trend, the serial killer thing? And I honestly, I think that it's because they had other outlets.
Yeah, health back up.
Oh, absolutely. I think another great example of that would be like Vlad the Impaler. I mean, undoubtedly, he had a bloodlust about him.
Of course,
Right.
Vlad.
Or Catherine,
Vlad had a
or
bloodlust.
what's her name? The Bloody Countess, Elizabeth Bathory.
Bathory. Yeah.
But they were doing it for reasons. They weren't doing it because they had something inside of them that meant they had to go out and kill someone to like some sort of release.
Thought it was gonna make her
so Vlad
young,
did it because he honestly thought he was serving God by killing all the Turks. Elizabeth, Bathory?
Bathory, yeah.
Thought she was extending her life by bathing in the blood of things. She wasn't doing it to, you know, cause pain and some sort of release out of herself so that she could live a normal life.
Because
you doing it for a reason.
Or did they just rationalize what was inside them to that? That's what I would argue. Something existed there would be what I would argue.
I guess it's come down to the definition of serial killer. So if you're doing it randomly because you have this internal need that must be met, that's another category than I'm doing it because I'm doing it for God.
Right, I'm
doing it because God wants me to kill the Turks, or I'm doing it because I think this will extend my life and make me look beautiful and bring me riches and husbands. Like they have a specific reason for doing their stuff, whereas a serial killer probably wouldn't be able to put it into words. They probably wouldn't be able to say I'm doing it because a goat told me. It's just something inside them that needs this release.
Right.
I don't know.
You know, I don't know. I mean, Dennis Rader called it his Factor X.
The other
told him what to do. I mean, I would think it's just they rationalized it that way. It was there, and that's just how they thought about it.
And in the Middle Ages, that's something you would not ever speak to somebody else because you'd be accused of having a demon inside of you or being a witch or some shit. And then getting burned.
Bathory never told anybody. They just eventually a servant escaped and they found all the bodies in her basement.
Right, and it was socially acceptable to her because she was the leader of that area.
Yeah.
And she had ready access to, you know, the virgin girls up until the peasants did what they did with her and the nobles rose up.
Yeah.
Whoa, rise up.
But when you say socially acceptable to her, it was just her. I mean, obviously, it wasn't socially acceptable to everybody else because they walled her up.
Right. It wasn't socially acceptable to them, but to some degree, it was. I'm looking for the right word here. Because she was a ruler, it was fiat.
They sent the homeless to Australia?
There's been just regimes all over the world, and whoever is ruling, they've automatically been given a
petty thieves and burglars and homeless.
Right.
Right.
If only there was a place we could send all the homeless we have here in America.
What's the story behind the Pied Piper? Is it the Pied Piper? Who's the one that led the children all away?
Yeah, that's the Pied Piper.
The Pied Piper. There's lots of. Do you know anything about that?
It's a fairy tale.
Well, yes, but is there history behind it?
No.
Something to do with the plague, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be an allegory for the plague, but it didn't actually, there's no historical record of anything like that happening.
Okay. I thought I'd heard something that there might be. But, okay.
Okay, so now let me back up because I'm a huge fan of fairy tales and that kind of thing. So there's always a grain of truth to every fairy tale I've found, no matter how far back you've gone. And I've gone back, really far back with some of these French fairy tales. There's always something, but it just depends on, again, modern interpretation, what it is, the context of the story as the whole. So there you go. There's the literary lesson for the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's.
But yeah, I can see what you mean. The rats and the he came to get rid of the rats first of all, because they were causing the plague. So definitely a plague connection there. But they wouldn't pay him, so he got rid of the kids. Now, like I said,
not paying me.
Like a ransom kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I don't remember reading in any of my fairy tale books. I don't remember reading anything like, oh, this is based on something that happened in Bremen in 1600. Nothing like that. But you know, like I said,
a grain of truth at some level. We just don't know the level.
Well, some of these things go back for 1,000 years. They've just been repeated orally over and over again. And then when people started writing them down, even then they were just bastardized because the first version of Grimm, for example, that came out in 1812, no one liked it. It was so horrific that they had to edit it. So the 1815 one has all the nice stories and all the horrible ones taken out. There's one in there that's called The Children Who Played at Slaughter. That didn't make it into the new book.
Fun.
Yeah.
They end up killing their their little children playmates because they're playing at being a butcher.
Sounds like fun.
And they just whitewash them all. So yeah, just again, everything's taken with context.
Yep.
Oh, this game's real fun.
There's
How did we ramble? How did we get into this from Jack the Ripper?
Because you got me here.
No.
That's an SK tangent.
Okay.
It actually plays like Symphony of the Night.
I'm looking
like
for,
a lot.
I don't know if you. Here it is. I don't know if you're aware since you like
Circle of the Moon is fun, but this is actually more.
Orson Scott Card
this is a little bit better.
has a book called Enchantment, which is a take on the Sleeping Beauty story.
That's an interesting story. Yeah, I might read that one.
he's got a very interesting take on it, and it includes time travel.
Oh, okay. Then
what?
I figured he was going to discuss the whole rape thing, but okay, maybe the time travel. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You know, I wish somebody would do more getting back to the roots telling of those Grimm fairy tales in movie form. I would think there would be a tremendous market for it in terms of horror.
It might be a bit rapey.
Well, there's still a market for that.
Well, that all depends on how you show it.
You
get the right filmmaker
you could do it.
too.
Oh God, yeah, but Disney did. Like Rapunzel, for example, she got raped and ended up getting pregnant with twins, and she eventually escapes. And it's just Snow. What is it? Sleeping Beauty gets raped. Just like there's an underlying level of creepiness in a lot of these stories.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, but they're so many of them weren't they originally told as like warnings? You know,
yeah, exactly.
Cautionary tales.
Go out in the woods, get raped.
Don't
leave
go
home
into the woods
without permission,
alone.
get raped.
That was a big one.
Yeah, seriously, the woods show up. Oh, but the really weird thing is, for cautionary tales, just about every single one of them has a wicked stepmother. Stepmothers are just the worst people in fairy tales. There's so many stories with wicked, stepmothers or kings remarrying, or so. If they're moral tales, then what does that tell us about stepmothers?
that they're
gold
diggers.
It's a rhetorical question.
And why not any bad stepfathers?
I know, right? There's hardly any bad stepfathers. It's always the women who die. It's always the good, pure mothers that have to die so that the wicked stepmother can come into the life of the heroine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But there you go. Well,
it's the inciting incident in the story, I guess.
Someone write this down. Turn it upside down. So write it so that the queen is left and has to pick someone, and it's a wicked step. I'm sure there's probably wicked kings in fairy tales as well. But yeah, that actually sounds like an interesting story.
Yeah, there's tales like that where a king comes in and an outsider comes in.
To be warned about wicked
yeah,
kings. They just knew.
You would think they would be needed to have a warning about that.
No, I'm just saying they were just too common to even bother with.
He was wicked when he was single. Now that he's married to our queen, he's still
pretty
wicked.
Strong.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Slow.
Yeah, it seems to be an oft-repeated mistake throughout history there, SK.
Yeah.
The wicked king.
It's to the point where the good kings are the ones that are noted, Oh, and he was a good king.
Yep. Basically.
Unlike all the others.
Yep.
This conversation has gotten very weird.
I think that tends to happen around here.
I'm drinking wine, but even I can tell this is a very strange conversation.
Oh man, that was a good stab.
I mean, you know,
it is.
It's just SK. There's just nothing else you can say.
Oh, good hit.
But you're just hitting all the topics I love, especially the fairy tales. Like I wrote a short story that had all the writer of a story goes to sleep and all the characters come to life, and she's writing about all the fairy tales. So I think I had Snow White Snow White she was smoking and drinking and had tattoos, and Prince Charming was like a biker, and all the bad guys were like really nice, and they were knitting and having conversations and having tea, and it was just. But I also write serious ones. So I rewrote a Norse mythology that was but a draugr, and I also wrote a Japanese Japanese creature I wrote about, and I like different cultures from different cultures as well, not just
creates
Western
a blade vortex.
So let's take a moment and let you plug one of your books,
sweet.
Like your most recent.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually am waiting for agents to get back to me. I've got a book out there waiting to see if I can get an agent. But so the last book before that one I finished was actually a historical horror. It takes place during the Black Death in England. It's called Revelation, and that came out last September, I think.
Awesome.
Wow. Where can that agent get a hold of you if they hear this, Kelly? Would you have a link that you could drop in the chat?
Yes, if any agents are listening, I'd be really happy to talk to you. Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter. I'm at ChaucerBabe, and I've got a website. It's www.kellyaevans.com. There's all kinds of stuff on there. I've got little samples of things, and there's all kinds of historical articles about Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons, and tons of stuff on the Black Death.
You never know who might hear this, you know.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's absolutely true.
Did I hear?
God, I hope.
Did I hear right? Did you say Chaucer Babe?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
CHAUCER.
You can comment if you
Thanks
want.
For the subs,
I set up
guys.
the account a long time ago. Chaucer is one of my true loves in life. So I read him. I read him in the Middle English. I don't read him in modern English.
Okay, I'm dying here.
Yeah, that must be.
I have tried to read some Old English literature.
Oh,
it's,
okay. So the Old English and Chaucer. Yeah, Old English is almost a completely different language. It's a lot closer to Old Norse. So I've taken some Old English and some Old Norse. Middle English, which is what Chaucer writes in, you would probably recognize quite a lot of it. The trick I was taught when I was learning it is if you read it out loud for the first little while, you'll get to recognize the words. They just spell
it's more phonetic, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
the little handle doesn't count.
Is this?
And then after
college
that
was a long time ago. Canterbury Tales, right?
That was So that's Chaucer. That's Middle English, and then after that comes Shakespearean English, which is in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and that's what that is. You've read Shakespeare at school, and then after that comes Modern English, what we talk now.
Mm-hmm. More or less.
Yeah, that's a whole other tangent.
Well, that was the 30-second timeline of the English language. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've read some Chaucer in whatever version he wrote. Middle?
Yeah.
Did you say Middle English?
Middle English, yeah.
Yeah. And
Middle English.
Even that was a bit of a slog.
Well, I might have to watch From Hell again after this conversation.
Oh God,
which we didn't.
Is so terrible.
I actually liked it in just the pure entertainment. Of course,
I don't think I've seen From Hell. I
You know,
don't think I've seen that.
Balderdash, but
all right.
Have you read the comic book, the graphic novel?
I didn't realize how long this episode is.
Oh, it's a little bit hard going, but I definitely recommend it. It deals with the whole Mason conspiracy as well as the Duke trying to cover up his pregnant girlfriend conspiracy.
Interesting. So what?
Which the movie gets into both too. Yeah.
What are the recommended Ripper movies or series?
The movie's based, From Hell. The movie's based on the comic book by John Morrison.
Yeah.
What else have I seen? Oh, I was looking. There's something I haven't seen it, but I know it exists.
Good Jack the Ripper movies. Think of any good Jack the Ripper movies?
I am looking that up as we're talking.
I saw it on YouTube, and I was like, I have to go back and watch that because I get all kinds of.
Oh yeah, in 1988.
Yeah, I have to see that. How cool is that?
Michael Caine and Armand Assante.
I don't know if he's playing the Ripper, if he's investigating. I'm assuming he's investigating, but it looks cool. I love Michael Caine.
Armand Assante has to be the bad guy.
Michael Caine is Inspector Friedrich Abelline in that.
Of course he is. Okay. I figured.
No, it wasn't. Or was it a made-for-TV movie? Yeah, it must have been something like a miniseries.
There's a lot of
made-for-TV. Because it has episode listings too.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of made-for-TV movies. There's one on. Oh, we're just watching this. There's one on Rasputin, I think, that I want to watch. So I've got a podcast play thing coming up about Rasputin that I wrote.
Oh man.
And I was.
There's
and it was
character.
Like. And it was made for TV, and I couldn't get it because it was like I saw it when I was Googling, but I could not find it anywhere. I love Rasputin. Sorry, there's another one of my favorite baddies.
And we got a 2016 TV movie on Jack the Ripper. I'm bringing that up again as we're talking.
2016. I don't know that one.
This one looks like it's kind of modernized. Or wait a minute. Here's the summary from IMDb. A serial killer walks the streets of Whitechapel, London, attacking and killing women. Later came to be known as the Whitechapel murders. Oh, maybe it is. 3rd of April, 1888, and this says to the 13th of February, 1891. So that would have brought in some of the non-canonical, I would assume.
Yeah, definitely outside the canonical ones, yeah. That's interesting. I should watch that, actually, because I'm actually working on a... I keep putting it down and picking it up. It's a novella about Nikola Tesla meeting Victor Frankenstein's niece, grandniece. And she has Frankenstein. Yeah, she has Frankenstein's original records. She meets up with Tesla in New York, and I use the Colorado Springs experiment of Tesla's to tie in the whole trying to resurrect something and the angry villagers. And anyway,
Holger Karsten Schmidt wrote this one.
Okay.
Sebastian Niemann directed. I haven't heard of any of these, nor have I heard of the stars. Looks like there's also a 1959 version of Jack the Ripper.
I love the idea of bringing Victor and Tesla together.
Well, it's his grandniece.
Well, yeah, but I mean the
idea, there's research, yeah. But anyway, I did a lot of research because I do a lot of historical research for my books. I did a lot of research about the time period, so I love watching things that take place around the 1890s and stuff like that, just to see. I could see the men's collars change and the women's, it's just the women's waistline changes, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, this one is evidently about a American detective being brought in to help.
Oh, so God, okay.
I roll with that.
Got to bring in the American.
1959.
That'd go over big.
In 1959, Jack the Ripper is what it's called.
So,
you guys got a Ripper problem? Got to bring in the American.
Do you have any Ripper shows that you would recommend?
Sadly I don't. I just don't. There's that show Ripper Street, but I just didn't enjoy it very much. I found it was too modern. It had such a modern sensibility. Like they were dressing people up, but they weren't acting like they should have done back then. So I watched the first couple of episodes and then kind of lost interest. There's a show called The Alienist.
Ripper Street.
It's not about Jack the Ripper, but it takes place around the same time, I think.
It's in New York. The Alienist is excellent.
Yeah.
I've watched the whole first season of that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I watched that when I was doing research for my Frankenstein book. So yeah, that was that. I really like the storyline there. Again, not about Jack the Ripper, but same time period. Jack the Ripper specifically, no, there really isn't.
For people who don't know, an alienist in the parlance of the show is a forensic psychiatrist.
Yeah, exactly.
Before it was really recognized as a field.
An alienist?
Gotcha. Daniel Bruhl plays the alienist.
So there was one.
That's a name.
I think it was a doctor during the Jack the Ripper cases that actually attempted doing this. So it wasn't known at the time. It didn't have a name. But he was the only person that said, "Oh, I think this guy might be a young guy. I think he might be right-handed. I think he might, the overbearing mother. He hates prostitutes." This sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's very, very basic.
Yeah,
like
you're talking about
sort of recorded example of this sort of the alienist sort of thing going on.
That is insane. That is insane.
Well, but then you get into.
I caught wind of it real fast. Talked about it. I realized I got some things wrong.
Ebbing's book. Psychopathia Sexualis, written about lust.
I think it got some things wrong about
it was in actually 1886.
about gun rights over
but was
there.
It actually applied to that's what I mean. This was actually
it's crazy, man.
It applied to the case, but
they recognized it. They've recognized it back in Roman times, but this is apparently the first recorded.
And I'm all about free speech, but man, I guess that goes way beyond that.
I mean, Ebbing in the book,
that's not even a free speech issue. That's a fucking violent, fucking massacre.
Yeah,
psychopath.
Lust murder being one of them. But I'm not sure if anybody applied that specifically to.
But 8chan's gonna get taken down.
To tell you the truth, the police officers in Whitechapel probably hadn't even heard of it.
Go after it.
Right.
Never mind read about it. Never mind had to talk about it at their.
She was a neurologist at the University of Vienna, if I'm not mistaken. Ebbing.
I don't think they called. Yeah, I don't think they called anybody in from the continent. They called in extra officers from like London Central, but they didn't. I mean, there was even an instance where, after the first murder, the first canonical murder, someone put up a reward, and the police said no. And then a second time, someone put up a reward, a group of business people in the area, and even Queen Victoria got involved. And she said, "Would you bloody well put up this reward?" And the police again said no. So even if external help was offered, they were very closed about it for some reason.
Well,
who knows?
The beat cops definitely they weren't especially educated people, right?
No, I know. No. That's why I suggested one of them could possibly have a father who was a butcher or a cousin. They were all pretty sort of working class backgrounds.
Yeah, and it seems to me, from my extensive research in movies and TV,
that's funny.
That even the even the police officers, there was this.
The stream that I'm listening to right now, there's actually pretty graphic images related to the Jack the Ripper
about crimes,
but having watched
whatever's obvious
a clip.
Well, the other thing about the East
of the
End
live
was,
feed
before what we call the Ripper
New
murders,
Zealand shooting,
there were constant.
I had enough graphic images for one day.
Like a couple of years before, a little boy's body washed up without a head or arms or legs, just the torso washed up. Prostitutes were being murdered, just not in such a severe way and not in such a limited amount of time. So it's possible when the first one was discovered, they were like, "Oh God, okay, here we got another body." But then when the other ones started happening, and that's why I tend to believe the canonical ones, they happened in such a short period of time. I think that's why they were taken so seriously this time. But I think the first ones, it was just like, "Oh God, I work in the East End. Here's another body."
Right.
But when the pattern jumps out at you too,
exactly
at that severity, so I imagine it would be hard to see otherwise with that amount of bodies coming in too.
Oh, actually, another good depiction of the East, particularly the East End around the same time period. It might be a little bit earlier. It's a show called Taboo. I don't know if you've seen it. Tom Hardy is in it.
Oh yeah, that's the one where his family has a trading company, isn't it?
It's yeah.
I haven't watched that yet. I need to.
So good. If you can watch it back to back, don't watch it week to week, because we tried it the first time and we watched it the whole time through and it was good. But if you get it on Netflix or something and just watch it stream, it's so good. Tom Hardy is so good. But it really shows. For that too. But it really shows the gritty, disgusting, dirty poverty, people dying, bodies on it, just everything. It shows it in all its glory in the show.
What about Penny Dreadful? I've never really watched that one, but wasn't that around the same period?
Sad that many people died.
Is that the one with the vampires?
No, that's. I don't think it's the vampires, but it has.
That was totally uncalled for. What happened there?
Neeson?
Look, man,
No, not Neeson. It's the guy who played the Scarecrow in Batman. Most
recently. Oh man,
I can't think of his name.
I know who you mean. It's
totally uncalled for.
No, I don't think I've seen Penny Dreadful. I know I've seen something that had a.
I mean, you might not like a certain culture that's coming into your country and all that, but you don't have to do that. There's no need for that.
Josh Hartnett's
You don't need to take it to violence. I'm disgusting. How am I disgusting?
Okay, I've nearly got it. Damn.
How am I disgusting?
Timothy Dalton?
No.
How am I disgusting?
No, Timothy Dalton is the one I'm talking about.
That's going to bug me because I should know that.
So the one I'm talking about, now I'm getting confused with the name. It takes place around the same time in London. Timothy Dalton is in it, and he plays like this vampire hunter. I think he's actually the guy who's lost his daughter, Lucy.
You got the wrong idea.
Van whatever in the Dracula story. And he hooks up with someone, but there's also like
Cillian Murphy. That's who I'm thinking of.
Thank you. But in this show, Frankenstein shows up, Dorian Gray shows up. Like, there's all these fictional characters that show up in it, along with this vampire. I don't remember what it's called. Damn it!
The way I talk about it, like it's sort of kick out of it.
The series.
I don't get any kick out of it.
Okay, so you're okay. So the
Are
one
you
I'm
kidding
thinking
me?
of is
Penny
Dreadful. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Penny Dreadful's the other one. Yeah.
No.
I haven't seen
it's just
Blinders.
sorry. It's just the way I was
that
processing
one is
it.
more like Gangs of New
This is
York
wild.
around that.
Like it does.
More like
I'm not a fan of the sort of the gangy type cop type movies, but the
and really what I was doing
Penny Dreadful one
is painting a picture for those who go to 8chan.
It's got like a
pretty much
element to
it's
it.
over,
and
man.
Like obviously
it's over.
Vampire, so you go in knowing what you're getting into. But I like the way they work
disgusting.
in all these characters like Dorian Gray and the others. So it's kind of cool.
No.
Also very gritty.
No. No.
But no, if you want the absolute way, I think Victorian London, East End look like Taboo is it.
Taboo. It is.
I'm gonna have to see that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
that was shortly after he was in the Revenant. He started production on Taboo.
Yeah,
well,
and he's
everyone
just
says sub to PewDiePie. That's a meme at this
point. He put up the money with his brother. His brother wrote the story, and he actually put up the money with his brother to actually get the production made.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we still fascinated with Jack the Ripper after all this time?
It could be unsolved nature. Yeah, definitely.
It's the same reason we're like, why are we fascinated with the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and the Jersey Devil and all these things? Because they've never been caught.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
people are fascinated by Richard III because they think he killed his nephews in the tower, but it's never been proven. So you get people arguing about it for hundreds of years. This guy supposedly killed his nephews in 1485, roughly 1484, and people are still to this day arguing about it. People love a mystery. People love a mystery.
That they do, although the whole Bigfoot thing kind of went down the tubes for me with the guy who admitted making those footprints in the woods with the gigantic feet.
And that show with those people that go out and actually do Bigfoot calls, it's like, oh, God, no, just no.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad, too, because cryptozoology is, kind of a bullshit thing, but there is a lot that still has to be learned in zoology as a whole,
Yep. But I think the other thing about the Jack the Ripper thing is so many people, and again with Richard III, this king back in England that I mentioned, so many people have written about it because they've been so fascinated by the initial facts of the story and the fact that the guy never got caught, and they present it in a way that makes people feel smart, and people like to feel smart. They like to think, oh, I made that connection. That's actually very cool. When in fact they're actually it's being presented that way. And I think with social media and with the TV we've got now and all the resources and all the TV shows about these, people are being fed things and people are being presented with information. And it's like they don't tell you the information until the end. And if you guess it, it's like, oh, yeah, I guessed who he was. And people love that feeling.
Yeah, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
That's why Dan Brown, that book he wrote, The Da Vinci Code, was so popular. He dropped little clues along the way, and at the end, when you get the reveal, everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I guessed it. He made them feel like they were really following everything." It's it's a good tool.
Yeah, just the nature of mysteries too. Look at from roughly the same time, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and its success.
Yeah, absolutely. And people seem to be fascinated with that period of time as well. I'm not exactly sure why. It's just there's this romantic idea of what the Victorians were like, and it's possibly because you've seen what the royals were like. That flip
everyday
the coin
life. Everyday life was not pleasant.
Yeah, That's one of my things I do as a medievalist is try and I get down to what do you call it, primary sources and try and get to the truth of matters and how people really thought about things and what they really did and that kind of thing. It's fascinating.
How do you know he's a king? You don't have shit all over him.
We didn't elect you.
Yep.
I have to watch that again.
One of the best movies ever.
I've actually got an outline of the king and the and Terry Gilliam what's his face doing the coconuts on my laptop as a sticker.
Is that John Cleese who did the coconuts in that, or was that Eric Idle?
It was the American
Terry Gilliam.
Oh yeah, Terry Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam did the coconuts. Yeah, he had on that hood thing sort of over his head, so you couldn't really see him. But Terry Gilliam's one of the most underrated pythons. Just I don't know why I'm talking about this, but his artwork was amazing. It really was. He invented
He invented that whole style.
He kind of invented memes, didn't he?
Yeah,
he did. It's actually from Minnesota too.
Right.
He has British citizenship now, along with the American citizenship.
Which is funny because Eric Idle now lives in L.A.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, guys, I think we've kind of
run the gamut.
Yeah, we've kind of run this shit into the ground.
Yeah, we have figuratively eviscerated this topic and left it in a dreary Whitechapel room.
We gutted it.
All right, so that wraps up the Real Monsters Jack the Ripper. I'm gonna end this here. Maybe do a quick video, another response to the shooting over there in New Zealand, so people don't misrepresent what I meant in that video. Okay? Don't get the wrong idea here. All right.